Hello, Springfield Faith Center, and welcome to this week's grand experiment that we're going to try out. So the goal of these times is going to be to have a conversation between a group of us. Obviously, in this case, there are four of us. So I think in the video, you will even be able to see our names on the screen. So I'll let everybody introduce themselves really quick. I'm Daniel.
I'm Tony.
I'm Matt.
I'm Patrick.
I like the pause in between each of us as we weren't sure where that was going to go.
Trying to be gentlemanly.
So the goal of this time is going to be to sort of go back over the message from the weekend and to talk about what was meaningful to us, and then draw out of that some engaging questions that we can leave you with so that you can discuss it with your family members, the people that you know, and just sort of something to give food to the body of Christ and to give food for thought during this season to keep us engaging relationally with each other. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. If you have not gotten a chance to watch the Easter service from this last weekend yet, I encourage you, pause the video right now, go back, take a few minutes, watch that, process it, and then come back and join us. If that's unnecessary, then we'll go ahead and jump right in. So Patrick, I know that you had some thoughts. Do you want to go ahead and get us started?
Totally. So one of the biggest things that hit me this weekend with everything that's going on, I mean, there's so much going on for us as a church and as a country and as a world, and then me individually. The biggest thing that I was focusing on was hope. And I don't necessarily have a question yet, and I think we kind of talked about how all of us kind of got input, so guys feel free to jump in. But like, for me, looking at what I would say are potentially, in my perspective, negative things, and then trying to put it into alignment with, okay, what is God doing? And although these are like horrible, sad, depressing issues, everything from, Pastor Dave to the pandemic to all of that, like, where is my hope and how do I look forward? And so that's kind of the biggest thing that really struck me the most.
I think that that lines up a lot with my biggest takeaway from the message, of just that idea that maybe all this stuff is reason to be hopeful if new life doesn't look like how old life used to look. Like if there is like transformation and change and it's unrecognizable, then it makes sense that we would be experiencing something that we've never experienced before. And then maybe that could be like a sign that could be a sign that God is doing something new and that this is a gateway for a new and beautiful thing to take place.
Yeah, that was my takeaway. The part where Daniel was talking about the disciples and what they were expecting. And then even after Jesus resurrects, they're still not expecting what Jesus wants them to. And so Jesus has to walk them through the scriptures and teach them. And it kind of hit me like, what am I expecting during this time? What am I expecting God to be doing in my life? What am I expecting him to be doing through me for other people? And am I really paying attention to what he's asking of me? And then keeping in mind what is to come next, because things aren't going to be the same going back. Going back to work is going to be strange.
Right.
Maybe we still have to be careful. Maybe the pandemic's not quite done and we have to be careful. Maybe I was thinking about it today, maybe shaking hands is no longer the way of greeting each other. What do we, fist bump or elbow bump? So what changes about who we are as a people as we proceed forward?
Yeah. So talking about this, because if everybody's takeaway was the same, and I like that, I think that, because that's obviously the constructive goal of this, is that as we move forward as a congregation, as the body of Christ, how do we process the negative circumstances that we're dealing with? Like Patrick said, whether it's, the passing of dad or the circumstances of the pandemic or any of the fallout, loss of work, loss of jobs, sickness, health, whatever it is, there's negative circumstances. What can we be doing for ourselves and the people around us to help us engage with the Lord in a way that is going to constructively help us keep our eyes on the hope and continue walking with him? Because one of the things that is in the case of the disciples, I like that they actually weren't able, at least not very effectively, to put down their old expectations until God brought the revelation of the new one to them. on the day of Pentecost. And it was the arrival of that new vision that really pushed the old stuff out and allowed them to let that down. So I think, where we're headed is what kind of questions can we be asking ourselves and the people around us that can get us thinking in that direction and moving in that direction? What might be a good starting question or a starting point to start moving our own internal conversations that way?
I think one question is, I think you may have posed this in the message, which was, are we just trying to gloss over this time? Are we trying to just move on? Are we trying to just, I think you said it in response to your dad, just get over it and proceed forward. Whereas the emotions and the angst are things that we need to experience. I don't think God is trying to push us so far beyond it that we aren't experiencing these emotions. So I think the question then is, what are you feeling?
That's good.
I mean, I think another question that could come from that is like, are we willing to let God be unpredictable and be open to what the new thing that he's trying to do is? Like, can we surrender like the notions that we have in our head of what the new thing should look like and partner with what he actually is trying to do, even if it looks a lot different than what we were imagining?
Yeah.
I like that. I was thinking a little bit for me, and I'll be honest, this might be a little bit before that question is, before I can start going down the road of like looking at what God has, I have to remind myself of the fact that I have hope in him in order to do that. And so for me, a question that I kind of started posing was, what do I need to remember in order to remember my hope? The contemplative pause.
Sorry, Patrick, I missed some of that, so I'm going to assume that it was engaging and witty. So
no problem. No problem.
Yeah, I know, Tony, we were talking earlier today about something for you that I think is relevant here too, is that sometimes, especially when circumstances are negative, it's tough to even trust that God is still good in the middle of that. So, how can we, I think one of the things to be asking ourselves as well is how can we keep our focus on the goodness of God in the middle when the evidence of life doesn't seem to support it?
Yeah, and I think that part of what makes being a Christian so great is that we believe like that God is displaying his goodness all around us all the time, even like when things are horrible, like the psalmist talking about how the skies proclaim the works of his hands. And so even if like the circumstances just feel or seem so bad, like there are ways to tap into God's goodness, and there are ways to allow yourself to acknowledge that it's there, even if it's not apparent in the ways that you wish it was apparent at that moment.
I like that, Tony, because not only do I think we have good questions as far as processing the sermon, I think that talking about like, what are our resources? So I know like we're trying to do these videos as resources. I know you've shared like Bible study stuff that's out there as resources. I know that even little things for my wife where she might not have time to do like studies, for her, the personal connections of driving by someone's house and dropping off food or something like that are resources that we have in order to remind ourselves.
Yeah.
Is it Paul who talks about faith, hope, and love?
Yeah.
So Brother Lawrence ends up quoting Paul in that and says, faith is, or I'll just read the quote. Many things are possible for the person who has hope. Even more is possible for the one who has faith. And still more is possible for the person who has love. And this is the part that gets me. Everything is possible for the person who practices all three. And I think sometimes we think, faith or love or hope, that those are things that are innate in us. And then if we don't have them, then we are somehow lacking. But they're practices.
Yeah.
They're a part of our daily discipline. Faith is not something that you just naturally fall into. It's something that you practice. As a musician, I can get that. It's something that is a part of who you are. If you never practice, you're never going to get any better. You're not going to be able to play that chord that your fingers don't want to do, and the same thing with hope during this time. We think of hope as that's the feeling that I need to get me through this. But what if hope is that practice that helps me get through this? It's the practice of being patient with our children, or being patient with our spouse. It's the practice of being present to the moment, or the practice of sitting with God when you would rather just stew in your own angst.
Yeah. I like that. Okay, so let's kind of think back over all the stuff that we've said and draw out a couple of questions. I've been taking notes off to the side here. So what are sort of the questions that we want to leave people with, stuff that we want them really processing over the coming week? I like the question about really engaging in the moment in the middle of our circumstances. The note that, are we trying to get over it and move on too quickly? And
I also like the question, can we allow God to be unpredictable? Because this is not a predictable time. Can we allow God to do something different with us?
Yeah. What else?
I think, Daniel, you froze there for a minute on my end, but I think you were saying this, but if you'd already said it, I want to echo it. What are we feeling right now? How do we practice awareness in this season?
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I know I'm repeating it, we'll just echo each other continuously, but for me, that same thing sounds like, what are the areas that I might be not allowing myself to sit in, that I'm pushing to get over? And I think that's basically what you said, Tony, but that definitely resonates with me big time.
Yeah, because that's the area that's going to come up and bite you if you don't let yourself sit in it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think what we had kind of going from there was once you've done that, so to me, this becomes a bit of a process. Once I've sat in a moment of allowing God to talk to me about something that's hard, then it becomes, okay, what are the truths that I need to remember to be able to have hope, or even to practice hope? What are the truths? My wife and I joke about this all the time. What do I need to go right on my mirror that I see every morning when I wake up that helps me remember the truths that I need throughout the day?
Yeah, I like that.
That's good.
And then, so I think the last question that, Matt, that you were identifying that I like is, how can we be practicing faith, hope, and love in this time? How can we be engaging with those things as a discipline, not just as an emotional statement of how we are, but as something that we're actively engaging with in relationship with God?
One of the things that my family has started doing is, we didn't have a daily habit of eating meals together. And so now we're eating meals together, and we're praying before every meal. And we're making it a habit of each kid getting to pray, which, with Jonathan and Emma is, not.
You're not even sure what God they're praying to.
Got a McDonald's sometimes. I mean, but it's amazing to see. We didn't really have a lot of deep spiritual practices as a family, and now we're beginning to build them because we're stuck at home. So we're paying more attention to each other.
Cool. Very cool.
And it can be that simple, I suppose.
Yeah, it can be that simple. All right. So, church, there are some thoughts and some hopefully leading questions. We will try and add them to the chat down below the video to have a reference for them, so you can keep an eye on them and carry them with you throughout the course of this week. But I encourage you to be talking to each other about these, carry this conversation on, find some people online, set up your own, video chat through Facebook or whatever you've got access to. Talk to some folks, stay engaged with each other. Don't stay isolated. Stay alone, but don't stay isolated, if that makes sense. So, as always, stay safe, stay home, wash your hands, and we love you all very much. We will see you guys very soon.
Bye, church.
Bye.